This is Radio TV Phononut, and boy have I got a treat for you tonight. Well, it's nighttime when I'm filming this. We have this radio from 1932. And it's got to be from 1932 because it says so right there on the little metal escutcheon thing around the dial there. Now this is not just any 1932 radio. This is a very special radio that has, in addition to the standard broadcast AM band, it has the modern FM band that goes from 88 to 108 megacycles. And if that's not enough, it has this side-mounted cassette player. But actually, the most noteworthy thing at all about this radio is it does not use vacuum tubes. It uses solid-state technology that consists of transistors and integrated circuits. Now, you're probably thinking, now, that kind of technology didn't exist in 1932. Well, that's what most people think, but it actually did exist in 1932. The technology was developed in a secret laboratory, and a few of these radios were built as lab samples. And then with the Depression and all of that and various other things taking place, the project was ordered mothballed, and the lab samples were ordered destroyed, but a couple of them did leak out of the lab, and I was fortunate enough to get my hands on one. In fact, I have a guy flying in tomorrow who is going to pay me $750,000 cash for this radio. Yeah, right, yeah. But on a more serious note, would you believe I've actually seen these radios for sale in flea markets and on sites like eBay and that sort of thing, and the people actually think they have a genuine antique all because of that date that it has printed on the radio somewhere. And would you believe some of them get highly offensive and disturbed whenever you tell them that what they have is not from 1932? They actually think that you're trying to beat them out of their priceless treasure, and they get very defensive and upset. So I just, when I see stupidity like that, I just ignore it. Let them find out for their own, for themselves. And if somebody's stupid enough to come along and buy it, well, then more power to all of them. In fact, at the flea market right now, there's a radio very similar to this that they want $50 for. And I laugh to myself every time I go by there and see it, because, for example, on the Shop Goodwill website, these Thomas and Crosley reproductions are a very common find on that site, and they can generally be bought for a lot less than $50. It's pretty bad when I can buy an item and even pay the shipping on it and get it here cheaper than what some clown at the flea market wants for their junk. Now, I bought this radio off of the Goodwill site, and with shipping I think it was around $15 and some change, which in today's world that's not bad at all. Now you're probably wondering why I bought this. Well, I'll tell you why I bought it. A little bit of sentimental reasoning there. Back in the summer of '89, well, actually a little bit before that, I had it in my head that I wanted a tube radio, but I wasn't really finding any anywhere, and the ones I was seeing at the flea markets and antique stores were more than what I could afford to spend, which at that time, as a 11 or 12-year-old, it wouldn't have taken much. So it was sometime probably early summer '89. We were at a family reunion in Georgia. Well, they really weren't that close to us, but my dad got on this kick. If he found somebody with the same last name that they had, then we were going to track them down and go to their reunions and that sort of thing. So that's how that came to be. And some of those people at the reunion, Dad had communicated with in the past, so it wasn't like they were total strangers. But anyway, I was talking to one of them at the reunion, and I mentioned that I was looking for an old tube radio. And he didn't really act too enthused, and I just forgot about it, really. Well, about a month or so after we got home, we got a call from UPS saying that a package was going to be delivered that day, and would somebody be home to receive it? So my parents said yes, somebody will be here to receive it. And the package was from that guy at the family reunion in Georgia who I spoke to, and he sent me a 1936 Sears Silvertone wooden cased radio, which I still have. I still need to repair it. Would you believe I've had it 30-something years and still haven't gotten it going yet? Well, actually, I did get it going at one time. The chassis in the one he sent me was pretty boogered up, so I eventually found another identical chassis and took the two and made one, but it stopped working and it needs to be gone over correctly. But at any rate, this gentleman sent me that wooden radio, and if I can put my hands on it, I'll try to show it to you at the end of this video. But he sent me that radio and an electric train transformer that was, what was the name of that thing? American Flyer, I believe was the name of it. I do not still have that. I don't know what happened to it, but I actually used that for the longest time as a makeshift variable power supply with, of course, a bridge rectifier on the output and appropriate filtering. But yeah, he sent me that radio, and Dad called him up, put me on the phone, and I thanked him for it, and Dad offered to pay him for the radio, and he said, no, I don't want any money for it. And Dad said, well, at least let me reimburse you for the shipping. And he said, no, I don't want any money for the shipping or the radio. That's my gift to your son. And he said, I hope he gets some enjoyment out of it. He said, he mentioned to me at the reunion that he was looking for a radio, and I thought I had one stashed in the barn, but I didn't want to say anything to him because I didn't want to build his hopes up and then me not have the radio. And then he said, I just didn't want to do that. So there you go. Well, shortly after I got that radio, my parents were telling friends of theirs about my new hobby, and next thing I knew, people were giving me old radios and television sets and record players and even old test equipment. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, there were still lots of older people around, including some former TV and radio repairmen that still had stuff lying around. And by that time, they were getting on up in age, and they just wanted to see the stuff go to somebody that could get some use out of it. But a type of radio that nobody came across with that I really wanted was a tube radio that was of the cathedral type. At that time, there was no internet as we know it today. The antique stores rarely ever had anything like that. And when they did have something, it was way up in price, usually at least a couple of $100. We had a once a month venue called the Collectors Fair that they held at a building at the local park. That's where the vendors would all get together. They'd come in from all over the state and some from out of state to sell their wares, and I think it cost 50 cents to go in and shop. I would occasionally see old radios there, but once again, they were priced too high for my blood. And like I said about cathedrals, the few I saw there were way out of our price range. So, I kept talking about how I wanted a cathedral radio that had tubes in it. Well, I'd started to look in some of the catalogs and would see these reproduction Thomas jobs, and one night at the supper table I made a smart aleck comment that I wouldn't have one of those sorry reproductions if they gave it to me. If it hadn't got tubes in it, I don't want it. Well, Daddy had kind of a strange reaction at that, and then later, when Daddy had gone off about his business, Mama got me to the side and she said, "You really hurt your father's feelings with that smart comment you made. He was planning on getting you one for Christmas, a reproduction for Christmas." And I believe she added that, "Yeah, we'd love to get you one like what you want, but since those are really not that plentiful, he was just going to get you whatever he could find." Well, at that point, I felt a little bit bad because I didn't know what Dad's intentions were. So Christmas rolled around, and what did I get for Christmas? A Thomas AM/FM cathedral radio, just like this one you see here, Christmas of 1989. I tried to show my enthusiasm, but quite frankly, it was fake enthusiasm, and I think my parents saw that. The radio really never worked right from day one. It would intermittently motorboat, especially on AM, and the cassette player worked for a little while, but it didn't last very long, and then it eventually started eating tapes. Well, despite my true unenthusiastic nature about the radio, I kept it in my room for a while and used it, and then I just got burnt out on it, and then it just sat there, and then when my dad saw that I wasn't using it anymore, he took possession of it, and it stayed in his room for the longest time, and then I think something finally happened to it. It quit working altogether, and no, I take that back. I think the radio still would work, but it still would motorboat from time to time. And after he passed away, I ended up giving it to somebody who just liked the looks of it. Now, looking back 30-something years, I realized that I should have been more grateful to my parents for supporting my hobby. And even though the radio they got me wasn't my first choice by any means, I should have been more thankful that they thought enough of me to get me something that was related to my hobby. Because over the years I've talked to a few younger people that had a vintage electronics hobby, and their parents were not as supportive as mine were. In fact, a lot of their parents just saw this as a bunch of old obsolete junk that should be sent to e-waste, and you don't even need to clutter the house up with that garbage. But I mean, yeah, sometimes I got on my parents' nerves with the amount of junk I had around here, but it's like my mother told a lady that questioned her about that one time. She said, "Well, I'll admit sometimes it's aggravating, but at least when he's at the house working on an old radio or TV, I know what he's doing. He's not out getting into trouble or breaking the law or anything like that." So, and back when we had a radio club and we had meets in conjunction with another club that was out of town, and my parents always got me to those meets. So, for that, I'm thankful. So, like I said, looking back, I should have been way more grateful over the gift of this radio that my parents gave me. So, for sentimental meaning, when I found this one on Goodwill cheap, I went ahead and got it. Now, it has some problems, which I'll show you in just a minute, as far as replica radios that were made during that time. General Electric also had a couple. One of them was a cathedral, which I don't have, although I could probably get one easy enough. Those pop up on the Goodwill site quite often. The other one that GE had, which I do have, was a little square tombstone looking thing. Well, not quite a tombstone, and then it had a lid on top that raises up to reveal a full function cassette recorder, not this little slot load tape eater like the Crosleys and the Thomas models have. And the GEs have much better reception on AM and FM and a lot better tonal quality. Now, with that said, when these Thomas radios work right, they're not horrible, but you know, they're really nothing special either. They're only good for local reception for the most part. So the problems this has is the typical scratchy pots and switches, even though that got better with me using the radio a little bit. And another problem it has is the tuning knob sometimes slips. And I think the reason for that is there's a rubber grommet in here that runs the turns the tuning capacitor, and I'm sure what's happened is over time that rubber grommet has gotten hard and it just doesn't have the grip that it did 30 something years ago. Yeah, it's hard to believe this radio is about 34 years old now. It's now getting to the point where the replica radios are becoming vintage. As far as when the replica radios were first introduced, I think the first one was probably around 72, 3, somewhere around in there, and it was marketed by Philco Ford to commemorate the anniversary of their baby grand cathedral. I had one time, and the innards looked almost identical to what's in this newer Thomas radio, and the performance was about the same. And you know, I ended up letting that one go too. But if I ever decided I wanted another one, you know, once again, those, they don't pop up as common as these and the Crosleys do, but they do turn up from time to time. So let's turn it on and see what happens.
1980 and get some Tom T. Hall on the air. Back when gas was 30 cents a gallon. Turn this one up and enjoy.
That's WSM. Now notice when I turn the volume all the way down, it doesn't really go all the way down. That may be by design, or it could be a defective pot, but no louder than it is, we're not going to worry about it. I just hope when I spray cleaner in it that it doesn't worsen the situation. Now let's see if we can get this tuning dial to slip. That's the tone control, which all it really is a treble cut control. Yeah, see, it's trying to slip now. And it only slips on that portion of the dial, so that tells me that rubber's got a slick spot on it.
Even outdo what Democrats are doing, or
yeah, now it's starting to slip again.
Good to me, you begin to retire. Now, many of them were to the left.
WDIA.
5-star reviews. I am
and on it. I actually.
I'm
Oh, I mean, that can't. There's no time to play the wild.
That's
All right, very good.
1390, that's 1450.
Normally puts the L in ISO.
This thing seems to have pretty wide band on AM.
Oh, I just
Not very selective.
And now it's going to be a now what?
The fidelity is better, but you know the trade-off is the selectivity is not going to be very good. Alright, let's flip it to FM, and one thing I like about this is it has an AFC defeat. And if I'm not mistaken, the GEs do not have an AFC defeat, so okay, that's without the AFC. So let's see what happens. The battery's going to die. That's what's going to happen. Alright, let's see how FM does. Well, let's get a little bit more light on here if we can. Alright, that may be a little better. Alright, let's see.
whatever colors you have.
Better get that off of there.
Every night and every day.
From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, Fast Lives and... Federal government's decades-long practice of seizing billions of dollars from Americans who have never faced criminal charges. We're introduced a bill that would overhaul federal civil asset
In the club with the lights off, but you act a shy fuck. Come and show me that.
About 9:30 sometimes.
Alright, now we're sticking up again.
You'll always have long blonde hair. You'll always be Memphis queen. You'll always be my.
Well, this is what passes for country music these days. Come on, move.
23.
Your grace reaches to the hurting.
Money coming out of my ears. I was doing construction
And
work at the
everything
time.
below that is either going to be religious programming or public radio. Now, we have our cassette player on the side, which I've never tried. The earlier versions of this radio had a mono RCA tape input on the back, but then they started adding the built-in cassette player, so the elderly people who was buying these could play their Fibber McGee and Molly and Amos and Andy tapes that they bought at Cracker Barrel after they had lunch there. We have this tape from Franklin, the 1980s word processor people, assuming that this is some kind of instructional tape, unless it's been erased. But we're going to stick it in here and see what happens, and if it chews it up, we're not really out much. I think it sounds like the tape is moving, but I don't.
This tape is presented as a public service of the American Council of the Blind. We are sending it to you to introduce you to one of the most innovative learning and language devices we've ever come across, the Language Master Special Edition. This handheld talking dictionary and reference tool supplements and complements Braille dictionaries, cassette tapes, or other cumbersome reference materials. For the first time, you can have instant access to the same reference materials as fully sighted people. Anytime, any place. The Language Master Special Edition was developed by Franklin Electronic Publishers.
Surprisingly, it works. I think when you push it in one time, it goes into fast forward mode, and then whenever you push it again, it ejects the tape. Yep, that's fast forward. And then we push it again to...
a horizontal screen running across the top and a small typewriter-style keyboard below. Then, imagine that this handheld device contains a Merriam-Webster dictionary with 300,000 definitions, a thesaurus with over 500,000 synonyms.
Okay, so the tape works, surprisingly enough.
Right and wrong, and what's right in eternal matters and religion. You add a little bit of this, and I'll sprinkle.
Now there is no rewind. However, you can fake it by turning the tape over.
Exactly what I call it. Story short, Greg. It was.
Try that again. Turning the tape over and putting it into fast forward mode, and that will do the same thing as rewinding the tape. I want to say this thing would automatically kick the tape out at the end of play, but I don't remember. It certainly doesn't do it at the end of fast forward.
I woke up and I heard a knock on the door.
There it is, rewound. Excellent.
It's Easter Sunday.
All right.
Well, that was the guy.
I guess the next thing we need to do is open this up
They had no idea.
and
what
clean
he was
these
up to.
pots
So I
and
realized, okay, it
switches
must
and
be
try to get this
the lunchroom
tuning
on the
dial
floor, and
to
he's on
work
his bed,
correctly.
And so they kept knocking. He just and said, "Come on, man, it's Easter.
And
You
if I
gotta go to church."
can't, you know, it's no big deal if I can't. This is not something that's going to be used on a regular basis. Like I said, I just got this more for sentimental meaning than anything else. At one time I had several reproductions. Well, I say several, a couple of more. I had one of the Zenith 5R, 5R312 reproductions from '88, I believe. It was branded Crosley, and then I had the Belmont reproduction from about the same time period. Those are the ones that had the heavy weight in the bottom of the radio because it was so lightweight that it would have flew off the table had it not had something in the bottom of the cabinet to weight it down. I think I ended up selling those radios for what I paid for them, and they didn't stay around long, and the people that bought them said that they liked the old look with the ability to receive FM broadcast. Had I put a actual tube radio up that was only capable of receiving AM, it would probably still be sitting here. So, you know, that's the state of radio sales around here. If it's got FM, I can usually get rid of it, but not for a lot of money. You know, 10 or 15 bucks maybe, that's about it. But anything with AM on it and priced accordingly, you can just about forget it. So enough blabbering on about this. We'll open it up, see what we can do, get a look at the inside. Maybe we can get it straightened out. Alright, before I start dismantling the Thomas, here is the inside. As you can see, not much to it. The circuit board looks to be largely IC based. And there's the cassette mechanism, obviously. Surprisingly, it has a Matsushita motor, so it might actually, that's actually a little bit better motor than what some of these used. Alright, let's tear this apart and try to get the tuning straightened out. Alright, we're almost out except for unsoldering the speaker wires. In order to get this apart, you have to first take the cassette mechanism out, which entails removing 3 screws from the underside, and then the 4 screws that hold the outer escutcheon on to the case, and then the whole unit just slides out. And then we have to remove the screws that hold this chassis here to the front panel, and then unsolder the speaker wires, and then it should just come out. If you'll notice, they have a plug-in cable running from the cassette deck to the main board, and then they have this one wire that's soldered in place, which is stupid. They should either make it all plug in or nothing at all should be plugged in, but it should be designed where you can unplug this from the chassis. But then again, these things were really not designed to be serviced anyway. So disconnect the speaker and get this out and try to service it. Alright, chassis is out. Now we need to remove this front piece to gain access to this tuning assembly and get it straightened out. And just as I suspected, the tuning shaft has a rubber roller attached to it, and this tuning shaft is very stiff, and the rubber roller contacts this area of the tuning dial here, and you can see how it works. I think if we clean this up, it'll probably be okay. Alright, I've removed the shaft, which was held in place by an E-clip, and removed all the tacky, sticky old grease there, and we've re-lubricated it, and we'll reassemble it, and then I'll clean up this rubber roller here, as well as the tuning wheel here, and then maybe it'll tune without sticking up on us. Alright, everything's cleaned up, back together, pots and switches cleaned, and this runs nice and smoothly and no hang-ups now. So I think we're about ready to put this back in the cabinet and see if it works normally. Well, we're back together again, and as I was searching my memory bank, I remembered another consequence of my snobbiness towards this radio and solid state stuff in general. One time me and my dad were coming home from Newton County from visiting my uncle down there, and we happened to pass by this used car lot. He knew the guy that ran it, and I saw a TV sitting out there by the junk pile, and from what I could see of it, it looked like a 23-inch Zenith Chromacolor 2 in a metal cabinet. And I said, "Dad, stop, I want that TV." And he said, "No, you're not getting that TV, and here's why." He said, "I was by here last week, and the man that owns this car lot offered me that TV to give to you." And he said, "I looked at it, and it said solid state on the front of it, and I told him, well, I appreciate the offer, but he don't want anything that says solid state on it, so you just throw it away or do whatever you want to with it." And when I saw the TV, all I was thinking is, this is something I could probably fix and make a few dollars off of. Back then, I could have probably got about $75 for that set. Maybe $100 if I could have got it going, but Daddy absolutely would not stop the car. He would not let me have that TV. He said, "Nope, the way you act about solid state stuff, transistor stuff, no, you're not taking it." So that right there pretty much taught me to, you might better think about what you say and what you do before you do it, because your actions might have long-term consequences. Now, he eventually got so he didn't care what I brought home, but that particular time he would not let me take that TV home because it said solid state on it, and after the way I turned my nose up and acted towards this radio and other things that were transistorized, he said, "Nope, no cigar." Alright, let's plug this in and see if it works better now. Alright, we're on the AM band. That's the tone control.
You can't like both. You just couldn't. You couldn't be a LeBron guy and a Kobe guy. Those people didn't exist. And now LeBron is playing in Kobe's uniform.
No static, that's nice. The volume control still does not go all the way down, but it's no worse after cleaning than it was before, and I'm not going to worry about it.
On opening day went a little bit long. I've been lost with the finish line. All the way to the wall. Hilliard scores.
Oh, I will sing of the...
Well, that's 670 coming in, so this thing is not entirely, not a complete turd. Alright, let's switch it to FM.
I just talked to him the other day. He actually got an operatic, like I think it was a recording contract, and I think she threw it in the garbage.
88.1. Pretty much everything from 88.1 up until 95.1, like I think I've already said, is either going to be religious or public radio.
And then just leveraging these.
I do. Obviously, like that great song says, I want to see Jesus.
Many times before, and we won't light up mountain, you won't climb up, coming after me.
If you have appliances, furniture, tools, and more, they'll take it off your hands. All accepted donations are tax deductible. For donation guidelines and more information, visit habitatmca.org/restore. Store hours 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday. Questions? Call 769-209-5100. Located at 615 Stonewall Street between Bailey Avenue and Fondren in Jackson. You buy, they build.
Love margaritas? Sing about it. iHeartRadio and the Margarita. moving at the fool while we up in the club. This is how
it's our mumble rap station.
I wanna wake up where you are.
Where's y'all?
Gold is fire insurance for investors. Are you insured?
Well, fans to pay attention to sport. But if people are still getting priced out of bringing young people, soon come back.
I mean, coming back to get it. Can't get it yet.
7285.
Those are sports sounds.
Land of the Delta Blues in the middle of the pouring rain.
Like I've already said, this does pretty good for local stations, but this is not a DX magnet, and you know, the GE replicas are better than this. I mean, I've had my hands on worse radios than this, as in some of the modern Crosleys, but you know, this one it's not a super hot performer. It's okay for local stuff, but that's about it. Alright, I guess that's about all I've got for this one. Better not let that play too long. That'll get me in copyright hot water. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the radio that officially started it all in the summer of 1989. The one that was given to me as a result of me expressing my wants at a family reunion. As you can see, the cabinet was the recipient of one of those antiquing jobs from probably back in the 60s, but I've decided to leave it alone. I've seen a whole lot worse. The grill cloth, I suspect that may also be a replacement. Like I think I said earlier, the chassis in this was really boogered up, and I ended up taking the chassis out of another set. It was in a different type of cabinet, but it was the same chassis, and I ended up taking that one and patching it up and sticking it in here. I've still got the old chassis somewhere, but all this many years later, I need to go back in this one and do it right and get it working correctly again. Here's the back. This had a 6N6 tube in it at one time, and I believe I robbed that for something. And the speaker obviously is not the original, and this filter can is obviously not original. So yeah, one day I want to tear back into this and do a more correct repair on it. But yep, this is where it all began, right here. So obviously this radio is not going anywhere. It'll stay here when all the rest of them would come near disappearing before this one would. So maybe one day we'll do a proper servicing on this.